Welcome back to Paul's Tech News and welcome to September, my friends. Less than 4 months remain in 2022, and now that the year's third trimester has begun, we are already experiencing the involuntary spasms and contractions that indicate the time has come. After long waiting, the year's bountiful harvest of new PC hardware has grown, ripened, and is ready to issue forth. The process is painful to be sure, but AMD has already induced with a live stream announcement Monday, where they shared pricing, specs, and a launch date, September 27th, for their next-gen Ryzen 7000 CPUs and the new AM5 platform. NVIDIA has a bun in the oven too, with the RTX 40 series, although they have been quite cagey about the due date. But now there's a big distraction because Uncle Sam is blocking sales of their AI GPUs to China. And the USB Implementers Forum has shown that as excited as one might be to introduce their newborn progeny to the world, choosing the right name can still be tricky. So I hope your pupils and perhaps even other parts of your body are well dilated. It's time for tech news. I think my water just broke.
Excellent!
Today's video is brought to you by the new FX series of cases and CPU coolers from EPYC, combining addressable RGB lighting with legendary build quality, top-tier performance, and near-silent operation. The Pure Base 500 FX can fit up to a 360mm all-in-one or tall air coolers while keeping things chilly thanks to airflow-optimized top and front panels. The Pure Loop 2 FX liquid cooler comes in 3 sizes and supports all modern mainstream CPUs, and the Pure Rock 2 FX air cooler can handle up to 150 watts TDP with style and ease. EPYC's FX series products are suitable for any build in need of a functional and tasteful RGB upgrade, so click the sponsor link in the video description for more. In case you missed my video or many of the others that went up Monday, AMD held an event in Austin, Texas early this week to officially announce the prices and launch date for the AM5 platform and the Ryzen 7000 CPUs that will slot into it. September 27th. 4 CPUs are planned at launch with a similar cadence to the 5000 series that preceded it, a 6-core, an 8-core, a 12-core, and a 16-core, respectively named 7600X, 7700X, 7900X, and 7950X, selling for a respectable $300, $400, $550, or $700 each. Now, on the one hand, the response seems to be pretty positive in that prices didn't go up compared to last generation, but on the other hand, one of the biggest criticisms for Ryzen 5000 CPUs was the relatively high prices and AMD's initial Intel-like behavior in not offering discounts for quite some time. On the third hand, though, Ryzen 5K parts did get some nice discounts eventually, so perhaps we'll see the same with the 7000 series in 2023 if the competition is there to warrant it. Performance does look tantalizingly good, though, if AMD's numbers are to be believed, as they claim both a 13% IPC improvement and up to 800 MHz higher clock speeds, resulting in up to 29% better single-thread performance versus the 5000 series. There was a lot of info packed into AMD's 33-minute live stream, such as the inclusion of an RDNA 2 iGPU in the I/O die for video out without a graphics card, the addition of a 4th B650 Extreme chipset to the AM5 lineup, and the introduction of AVX 512 support, so check my recap video for a quick rundown of all that. But one thing I haven't seen highlighted very much is their lower wattage efficiency claims. AMD says that when limited to a 65 watt TDP, the 7950X can provide up to 74% more performance than a 5950X. Many speculate that the new chipset, which is built on a 6nm process, has a lot to do with this, but it has huge implications for the mobile variants of these CPUs once they're released. And now I must walk back one of my claims from last week. I said we could do away with shady reporting on leaks and rumors, since AMD would be providing us with the straight dope info for AM5, but unfortunately many of their answers only brought up more questions. The first one is, what about the 3D V-cache variants of these chips? The die stacking tech that allowed AMD to launch the 5800X 3D as both the last hurrah for AM4 and the new fastest gaming CPU ever undoubtedly wasn't scrapped, so it stands to reason that even faster 3D V-cache variants of the 7000 series will be available for gamers at some point too. Enter the unflappable Twitter leaker Greymon55 with this tweet: V95, V9, V8, and a reply saying CES. These 10 alphanumerics clearly have only one interpretation. Greymon55 needs a new fully functional keyboard. Also, obviously, the Ryzen 9 7950X 3D, Ryzen 9 7900X 3D, and Ryzen 7 7800X 3D will be launching, or at least announced, at CES 2023, making suckers out of any gamers who were foolish enough to hastily plop down the cash for a non-3D variant in late 2022. That aside, and of course assuming that any of this is true, it would be exciting to see what 2CCD versions of 3D V-Cache chips can do, as would presumably be the case with the 7900X3D and the 7950X3D. The 7950X3D could have as much as 208 megabytes of combined cache, which is more than double what the 5800X3D shipped with. Not all rumors are positive though, and another shared by Enthusiast Citizen over on Bilibili says these new chips could run hot, claiming that the 7950X draws 230 watts, the limit for AM5 at stock, and throttles to below 5 GHz, while the 7600X pulls 120 watts and gets up to 90C. Also at stock. If those wattages seem high to you, remember that the TDP ratings for these chips, which are 170 watts for the 7950X and 105 watts for the 7600X, are not equivalent to actual power draw, which will typically be a bit higher. That said, and noting that I of course have no extra knowledge of these things that I can share with you, Hassan's bolded comment on the WCCF Tech article pointing out that these numbers were likely obtained with engineering or qualification sample CPUs and likely without up-to-date BIOS versions is, well, it's good to keep in mind. One thing that many high-end desktop enthusiasts had on their minds in the wake of AMD's announcements was the lack of any mention of Threadripper, which seems like it would be a cool place to drop in some Zen 4 chiplets. In fact, it seems like Threadripper was actually removed from the roadmap if you compare these slides from the Computex announcement back in June to this that was shown on Monday. We now just see Zen 4C with no more Threadripper logo, and when AMD reps were asked about it, they gave fairly non-committal answers. "We're not talking about a timeline for that now," said David McAfee, although it doesn't seem like they're ruling it out either. Zen 4C chips were described to me as capable of providing the same performance as Zen 4, but in a much smaller die size thanks to being built on a 4nm process instead of 5nm. But if we're willing to entertain another Twitter leak, there might be more info on what Zen 4C will bring to the table. This time from Yuki_ans, who dropped a bunch of info on next-gen EPYC chips codenamed Genoa, Genoa X, and Bergamo. Genoa would use the same Zen 4 dies as the Ryzen 7000 series. Genoa X would add 3D V-Cache to those Zen 4 dies and would be cache optimized, providing over 1 GB of L3 cache per socket with the top-end 96-core EPYC 9684X. And Bergamo would use smaller Zen 4C dies in order to fit as many as 128 cores onto one CPU via 8 16-core Zen 4C core triplet dies, or CCDs, as is the case with the flagship EPYC 9754 CPU. Other mind-boggling specs include up to 160 PCIe Gen 5 lanes with a 2-socket setup, as much as 6 terabytes of 12-channel DDR5 4800 memory per socket, and apparently a launch coming in the first half of 2023 if these slides are legitimate. So yes, it would be totally cool to see this hardware ported over to the slightly more consumer-friendly Threadripper lineup, or maybe, like me, you're thinking of the potential for Zen 4C dies on the AM5 platform. If they truly have 16-core CCDs in the work, and they have a similar footprint to the 8-core Zen 4 CCDs, what's to stop them from producing a 32-core AM5 CPU? You heard it speculated about here first. Next-gen Ryzen CPUs will be led by the flagship 32-core 64-thread Ryzen 9 8970X. 3D, why not? Let's add 3D V-Cache too. Okay, let's talk about not AMD stuff. How about NVIDIA? Their stock price dropped pretty significantly in the past week, and no, it's not because the RTX 40 series was canceled or anything like that. We still don't know much about the 40 series, but my bets are in that we'll hear an announcement about it at GTC, which is September 19th to 22nd. The NVIDIA news this week came Wednesday, when NVIDIA revealed that the United States government had informed them on August 26th that they could no longer export their A100 and upcoming H100 AI chips to China or Russia without a new special export license. NVIDIA estimated that the change would cost them $400 million US. The reason was, of course, national security, and the result was an immediate dip of about 7% in NVIDIA's stock price. AMD wasn't left out either. Team Red said they also received new licensing requirements from the US Department of Commerce that apply to their MI250 chip, and their stock price fell 3.7%. Questions lingered as to how far-reaching the requirements would be and whether they would impact ongoing product development by preventing shipment of samples to facilities in China, but an update on Thursday allowed for an extension. For the next 7 to 12 months, NVIDIA can continue H100-based projects in China and use Chinese facilities, so they will have time to find new manufacturing and repair partners elsewhere. Or perhaps the SEC will just grant them that license and this will all blow over. Speaking of things that blow, if your jimmies are feeling a bit rustled, it's probably due to the wind tunnel-like sensation provided by these tech briefs. And my panties are definitely in a bunch over this news that came out Thursday. USB 4 has a successor. It will double the bandwidth from 40 gigabits per second to 80, and you'll never guess what they're calling it. USB 5? No, of course not, you f***ing moron. That would make sense. The brilliant minds over at the USB Implementers Forum have dubbed it USB 4 version 2.0, which is way better because it's longer, it does nothing to imply what makes the spec different, it further obfuscates the different connection standards available via a single USB-C connector, and of course, calling it 2.0 leaves them open to make a version 2.1 or 2.07 or some such BS in order to fulfill their actual goal of driving us all out of our goddamn minds. I think I've made my feelings on this clear for now. Another thing that's been driving many of us slowly to the point of madness is Intel's Arc GPUs, which are kind of launched, but not really, a fact that their marketing team doesn't seem to fully grasp since they keep promoting them. But hey, if you wanted a full list of the Arc GPUs that haven't launched, the new open source OpenGL and Vulkan driver for Linux called Mesa 3D has revealed the entire lineup, including the Arc Pro series for workstations and the Flex series for data centers. Cool, right? I mean, like there's A580 in the middle there. Anyway, despite rumors that they're giving up on Arc, Intel says they are still all in on making discrete GPUs, and in fact, their engineering team has moved on to work on the follow-ups to Alchemist, dubbed Battlemage and Celestial. The software team, thankfully, is still hammering away at their subpar Alchemist drivers, and if you want an extra bit of reading, check out Semi-Accurate Charlie's take on why Arc delays have continued. Spoiler, it's because of the Russia-Ukraine war. I'm still rooting for Ukraine. Finally, we have a story that makes you question reality. A dude named Jason Allen used the AI software called Midjourney to create a bunch of images, then enhanced them with gigapixel AI and printed them on canvases to enter the Colorado State Fair's Fine Art competition, which he won. Actual artists are offended, of course, because being an artist is hard enough without having to compete with computer programs that can do the same thing way faster, and perhaps this is a subject that warrants a deeper discussion than what I get into here on Tech Briefs, but I will say this, it's all about disclosure. Sure, Mr. Allen clearly labeled his submission to the State Fair as Jason Allen via Midjourney, but that doesn't exactly specify that it's AI generated, and he certainly seems to hold a high opinion of the special prompt he used to create the images. My dude, I create special prompts that I enter into the Google search bar all the time. That doesn't mean I call myself an artist because I can efficiently hunt down a good carnitas recipe. If you're leveraging someone else's code or AI training to make something, you didn't make it yourself. Enter an AI-specific art competition, and then no one will complain. But there you have it, guys, your AI-generated tech news for the week, and if you liked it, click that like button or leave me your own AI-generated comment down below. While you're down there, all the articles I talked about today are linked in the description if you're interested, and you can check out my store at paulshardware.net for high-quality merchandise, t-shirts, hoodies, beer sets, and my new 8-bit designs, which are flying off the shelves. Subscribing to my channel is always a good call too. Thanks again, everyone, and we'll see you next week.